So here we are under the vehicle, and what we're going to do now is go step by step on how to remove the exhaust system. The first thing we're going to pull apart is we're going to separate the rear muffler from the remainder of the exhaust system. There's going to be two 8mm bolts over here, or nuts, that you're going to remove that hold the mounts, and there's going to be 4 on this side. Then what you're going to do is disconnect the 4 bolts right here at the flanges, and then the rear muffler will come off. Now, in order to get the center section out of the vehicle, we've got to remove the cross brace. To get the cross brace out, we've got to take 3, 1 on each corner, 1 in the center, 10mm bolts. We're going to then remove the 4 8mm bolts here and leave the bracket on the center pipe. We're going to leave this area connected since we want to take the whole piece off as a unit. And we're going to take these 4 8mm bolts apart here, and that'll take the entire exhaust system off the vehicle except for the catalytic converters, which that'll be another project. So what we're going to install in this M3 is going to be a complete Supersprint exhaust system, including Race Muffler, center resonator, metallic race cats, which are downstream similar to the European models, and the stepped headers. The stepped headers here, the new version stepped headers, will go directly into your section 1 or into the original metallic cats or connecting pipes. The nice thing about these new version headers, they'll also fit right-hand drive cars. Okay, here comes the more difficult part of this exhaust project. That's installing a set of Supersprint headers. Now, when you do this project, allow yourself about 5 to 6 hours to do this job right. There's a lot of fasteners to disconnect. There's a lot of things you have to be careful of so you get it right. You don't want to damage anything on the car, and you also want to make sure that you don't have to redo anything. So as we're looking on the car here, I've already removed the plastic coil cover, and I've got another video that we've done that explains how to do that. Now, what we're looking to do here, if you get closer to the exhaust manifold here, I'll put a light on it. We're going to remove this heat shield right here. There are 3 bolts. There are 8mm bolts that hold on this heat shield. There's 1, there's 2, and all the way in the back here there's a 3rd one. There's also a 6mm one. It's a 6mm bolt. These are 10mm heads. This will be an 8mm bolt with a 13mm head. Now, what we want to do to make access a little easier, we're going to take the coolant hose off right here since it's right in the way of the bolt, and then we're going to take the coolant bottle out. To remove the coolant bottle, what you've got a sheet metal screw here I've already disconnected. You're going to disconnect the window washer reservoir filler right over here. It comes to one side. You're going to want to disconnect this line right here that goes, it's the overflow, it's the breather to the radiator on the other side. And then we're going to disconnect the hose that goes right down to the radiator feed line, which is this line right here. Now the whole unit will essentially just lift out of the vehicle. It sits on a little rubber grommet. And what we're going to do is, just for right now, I'm just going to move it over to one side so you can kind of see where we're going here. First thing we're going to do is remove this air pump hose right here. Now, these on both sides have quick disconnects. You just kind of squeeze them right here. You have to squeeze a little firmly, and then they'll pull straight back. And then you'll do the same thing likewise over here. That hose will come out. Now what we want to do, we want to take these bolts out right here. To get them out quickly, you want to use a 1/4-inch drive swivel. But to get them started, to loosen them up, I would recommend using a wrench so you don't damage your swivel assembly. Now, this is a relatively new car, or a relatively low-mile car. I'm going to loosen all 3 of them. I got this one back here. This is a relatively low-mile car, so it's not going to have a lot of rusted fasteners and connectors on it. This is a 35,000-mile car, so it's basically, we're taking the bolts out for the first time, and it seems to be working pretty well. Okay, we've got the 3 bolts out of the heat shield, but it's not going to come out yet. We've got to move it down a ways, but this air derivator valve here needs to come off first. And we're going to take these 2 nuts off here to get those off. Okay, we've loosened the heat shield, and at the back of the heat shield, all 4 of the O2 sensor wires are under a little wire clip. You've got to disconnect those first. That'll allow you to push the heat shield back far enough to pull it out the front. Here's the two clips at the back that are holding the O2 sensor wires. Make sure you disconnect those wires, then pry the heat shield down at the body. There's a second heat shield. You're going to pry it back slightly, and then you're going to pull that heat shield out through the top like that. It might take a little bit of moving, but it will come out. Okay, we've got our heat shield out of the way, and here are the headers, or the factory catalytic converters with their headers on it. I've got the 1/4-inch drive ratchet in position. If the studs and nuts aren't too frozen, you could probably take them off with the ratchet assembly as you see it. I can see that I can probably do about 12 of them right now from this vantage point from up above here. Now what you will have to do is put a little WD-40 on them to loosen them up a little bit, and you may have to use a shorter extension on some of them. I doubt if you'll use a longer extension on any of them, but once they get started you should be able to loosen them pretty easily. They're all copper lock nuts, so they should release without too much trouble. If you've got a car that's got a little bit of a rust issue on the studs, what you might want to do is just give them a little bit more time, maybe give them an hour or so soaking with the WD-40. Now, way at the very back there on number 6, it might be a little more difficult to get to, but I can imagine you can probably get all but the bottom one on that side, and we'll do the rest of them from underneath. Now, we're going to go ahead and start taking these nuts off the top, and we'll see how many we get, and then we'll lift the car up and do the rest from the bottom. Okay, we managed to get all of the exhaust nuts. All 18 of them came off from the top. There was one or two that could have been a little easier from the bottom. The most difficult one was on number 1, the bottom one. That was number 1 flange. Now, we've pulled the headers back off the head a little bit, and we've only at this point got about 2 hours into the project. First thing you're going to want to do is to remove the little holder that holds the O2 sensor connectors. And it's got two, looks like it's got 2 6mm nuts holding it down. There's a little plastic clip that goes into a bracket. It'll release. You'll roll the piece over like this, and you'll see that you've got the O2 sensor harness that stays with the vehicle, and then the actual O2 sensor that connects to it and follows along the bracket, and then you'll pull those out one at a time. They'll come out of these little harness pieces just like this. And then what you're going to do is you're going to disconnect them one at a time, and the O2 sensors are labeled. Obviously, the harness piece that connects to it from front to rear is labeled 1 through 4. At the back of the cylinder head, down inside, underneath the cowl, you're going to see that there's the exhaust temperature sensor connector right there. You'll disconnect that also, and then all of the wire harnesses for those sensors will go down the back side of the head, and you'll see from the back side of the head underneath the vehicle that there's plenty of room to pull those wires on through. Okay, now what I've got here is I've fed all the O2 sensor wires and the exhaust temperature wire out the back side underneath the vehicle so they can't get hung up on anything. I've got the 2 cats loose, and I'm feeding them out together and bringing it down. You kind of want to bring them together till you get it out far enough, then you can work with the rear set. That rear set looks like it's ready to come out. There we go. We got the first one out. Here comes the front set. There we go. Okay, here's what it's going to look like at the side of the cylinder head without the catalytic converters or any kind of headers on it. We've got our exhaust ports there. Some of our exhaust gaskets are still hanging. We're going to use new gaskets to make sure we don't have any leaks when we're finished.